Okay, we're off.
Okay, I'm good. I'm just getting a few slides ready, um, which will help to explain. Hello, so what I'm going to do is just explain a concept called show, do not tell. And this comes from a lot of literature work. There will literally be classes within writing. If you're going to take writing classes, it will explain to you show, don't tell. But it's also very important in filmmaking. Now, when you're watching a film, you will effortlessly absorb information about the characters, about the situations and the scenes, but you won't be told about those characters. Okay, so observational learning and absorption is very powerful. And what it tends to do is one of the main key things is it will bypass resistance. So if you tell someone, you know, that believes 2 and 2 equals 5, if you tell them it equals 4, all they're going to do is reject what you're saying. But if you show them how mathematics works and numbers, etc., you show them how that works, they will then be able to absorb the process to come to their own conclusion. And it's very, very key. So basically, what it's about doing, it's about understanding what changes people's minds. Because for the most part, we haven't known what changes people's minds. But what you have now is a huge amount of research that shows, because they're able to create very elaborate and clever studies to show and demonstrate what actually did change someone's mind. So the data that they have now is quite profound. And here's one example. Now, whatever you think about the climate, etc., let's just put that to one side for a moment, because this is just an example where they was trying to get people to use less energy. Now, without all the bad agendas that we have in the world today, that would not be a fairly bad thing. If people were more efficient and didn't waste things, then you could argue that's a good thing. So they were trying to get people to be more energy efficient. Now, they told them that it was good for the environment. That had no effect. They told them that they would save money. That had no effect. So there was loads of messages that they tried that didn't work in any way. But one message worked profoundly, and it was to tell them how much you used compared to your neighbor. So in this example, you can see that the neighbors use 744, yet you use 2,300. That alone changed people's behaviors significantly. So what you have is, as we obviously know throughout the pandemic, social proof is very key. So what this piece of information has done, what it's done is it's shown people something. Okay, it's not told them to use less or whatever. It's just shown them what they use according to someone else. And then that person, because of their drive to fit into society and be a good citizen or whatever, as and obviously you'll have other people that will react the opposite to this. But the majority of people in society literally want to be like other people. So what you'll see is the key is there's two things here. One is to know what are those factors that will influence someone's thinking. And secondly is to, and obviously you've got to do all this ethically. That's, that should be a given. But secondly is how do you show them that information? Okay. Because you can't tell them for a number of reasons. And so what I'm going to do now is just to reassess what we think thinking is. So what's happened is that John Barr, who's one of the pioneers of social of our decisions and our thinking is unconscious. And his brother-in-law, is a rocket scientist, turns around and said, "Oh, that can't be. I can't think of a single time that that's happened." Now, when you think about it for a moment, you'll see the comedy. You wouldn't be aware of your unconscious thinking because by the nature of it, it's unconscious. Thinking. So the truth is, that we're not aware of what we process unconsciously. So if we look at a couple of examples, and you'll see in a little while why this is so important. So basically what happens is that there'll be a stimulus of some kind. It might even be you just become hungry or whatever it is, but there's be some kind of stimulus. And then what happens is there's processing by your mind, and the mind is so incredible that it does most of those things unconsciously. Like when I'm speaking now, I don't think about the words I'm using. So you just end up with an output. So memories, if I ask people, what the color of their car is, okay, you're going to be able to produce that. If I asked you what you did, you know, in the past, you're going to bring up a memory. As I said, with language, when I speak, all the words are provided for me by my unconscious mind. I don't choose each word consciously. That makes sense? Language is an unconscious process. Now, when I'm walking down the street, I don't think about how much of my weight to put on the left leg, then the right leg, then the left leg, then the right leg. That's all done for me by my body and my unconscious mind. So what you'll begin to see is that so much of reality that we experience is done unconsciously for efficiency. Now, the next piece is the real key piece that we're leading up to, which is most people's judgments are unconscious. So if somebody had watched the BBC or any other state propaganda through the pandemic and they believed everything they said, and then they walked out in the street and they went into a shop and someone walked past them without a mask, what would they think about that person? Okay, they would probably look at that person and say, oh, they don't care about health or whatever, because that person has made an instant judgment which has come from all the unconscious processing information that they've been convinced that masks are good. That makes sense. So you'll see that that person isn't deciding to make that judgment. It's based on all the information that's in their unconscious mind. Now, when it comes to the unconscious mind, only a fraction of the information in there you have access to. So I don't have access to why I put 40% of my weight on my left leg when I walk. I don't have access to that. It's done outside my awareness. When you think about what color your car is, that is something you do have access to. So that's pre-conscious. But most of it's unconscious. And that's why the media becomes so powerful, because they will show lots of pictures and they will tell lots of stories, and then people will unconsciously come to conclusions. And what it's been shown is that there's a thing called narrative translation, that they know that if they put storylines into popular TV shows, it will adjust the public's opinions and it will shape their attitudes. They know this now, which is why you cannot watch any TV program now without there being a lot of mixed couple relationships, which are like gay or homosexual, whatever, which obviously is nothing against that, whatever your beliefs are, but it's appearing at much more the frequency than you would see in reality. And that's because there's agenda at play. And then you could ask the question whether that agenda is of a good nature or nefarious. And of course, that's up for people to decide. But the key point here is that when you're talking to someone, they've come to the conclusion that a certain medical procedure, like getting jabbed with a novel new drug with no testing, is safe and effective. That's a conclusion that that person's come to. And that person has usually not thought that through. It will either be a case of that has been repeated so often that it becomes into their vocabulary. But more often than not, what's going on is that the person has a certain amount of drives to be safe, to be part of society, etc. So we know what these drives are. And what the media and the propaganda does is it looks to set a series of beliefs, which anyone familiar with computer programming are just variables. So they set these variables or these beliefs. And then what happens is when there's a stimulus, so if you say to someone, oh, I don't think it's safe, what happens is that in their mind, it bangs off all of these and they end up with this output. Okay. And that's really, really key to understand, because the key point is that you need to change the inputs in order for the outputs to change. Okay, so you never actually want to challenge a person's belief because all that happens then is they defend it. Okay, and it's really, really key to understand this because in those drives, what you often find is that children of a parent will often develop a polarity response. And that means whatever you suggest, they will do the opposite, but they won't do it consciously. It becomes a program that they run, particularly if they're told to do things, etc. So what happens is that people develop these patterns of behavior and they will run them and they will be automated. So if I went to shake someone's hand, they would raise their hand before they even thought about it. Makes sense? So it becomes a habit. So what you effectively have is that these bits of information that are in the unconscious mind have been conditioned there via standard Pavlovian conditioning. And because they operate outside of awareness, if a propagandist had access to a person, so say they sat in front of the TV, they could, over the course of time, set up a series of beliefs, knowing full well that a certain amount of people will come to a very specific conclusion. And this is what a filmmaker is very good at. They will present scenes so a person comes to a conclusion. So, for instance, in Jack Reacher, the director is looking to create the audience to see Jack as a person that cares for women and protects them, and he also cares for animals. So in the first scene, Jack Reacher walks into a new town, and then a couple come out of a store, and the man is being very abusive to the woman, and then Jack intervenes and protects the woman. Now, that scene is effectively showing you that Jack cares for women. And then there's an animal that's tied up and being mistreated, and then Jack punches the owner. Again, they're showing you. And then what happens is that the audience will develop a bond with that character. Now, that's effectively what the media does. If you look at any of the wars that are going on at the moment, the slanting is pretty much saying this is the hero and this is the villain. And one might argue that all wars contains multiple villains, to be honest. But hopefully you begin to see that. And then what you've got, actually, I won't go into this right now, it's quite key, but I will just open up an article. So I've produced a few articles on this that is very useful. Where's it gone? Right, so basically show, don't tell, and obviously I can send this in. But what you got is crucial in effectively sharing important information, influencing people's minds. This principle is rooted in various fields. Okay. Now, the key point is that when people are told information that contradicts their existing beliefs, they often experience cognitive dissonance. But when they witness it themselves, they won't experience that. So what would be an example of this? So an example would be, and I can obviously send the article through. So when it comes to 5G, for instance, you could tell someone 5G is unsafe, but what happens if they believe it's safe? What are they going to do? They're going to reject what you're saying. Now, do they have motivation to believe it's safe? Anyone want to? Yeah, they have a lot of motivations to believe it's safe. Okay, so a lot of people's belief system is generally built on desire, not on reality. So how could we show them? Well, you could, and what you've noticed is if you show them one of those meters going off with the RF no longer becomes invisible. It's now something that exists. And then if you show them again, for instance, if you showed them blood under a microscope, being exposed to high RF frequency, if you had a personal trainer, okay, and they wanted their client to do a crunch, and they just said to their client, right, I want you to get on the floor and they just told them what to do. That's not very effective. But if the trainer gets on the floor and demos the exercise before he asks the client to do it, that becomes a very effective way. Now, What happens is when you show people information, I'm just going to share my screen again. When you show people information, what tends to happen is that it goes into the engine room. Okay. So imagine, let's take a consensus, for instance. Yeah. So most people think that there was a consensus around the science. But if you could show people that there was 2,000 scientists that were silenced, yeah, literally show them those people and what they were saying, that then undermines that belief. When someone for themselves notices the media's lying, they generally don't trust the media anymore. But if you told someone the media lies, they would normally justify that they don't. So something else that you're fighting against is actually what's known as system justification, that people, because when they're part of something, they look to justify that thing as being okay. Because effectively, if they're not complaining about it, then they're kind of identifying with it. So what's really, really key is just to understand that subtle difference between telling someone a piece of information and showing someone a piece of information that leads them to that conclusion. And that's such a subtle difference that if you can get information into the person's mind, then they will come to their conclusion. And it's my opinion, all the people that became aware during the pandemic had experiences where these changed. So you'd have someone say, oh, my uncle died in a car crash, and then they put COVID on the death cert. Okay. That is such a contradiction to believe in the trust that the authorities are telling the truth, that they no longer will believe that because the contradictory information. And there's lots of technical reasons, which I can go into if needed, of why these things are key, but it's really about how we absorb information. And what we're always trying to do is we're trying to assimilate information. Okay. Now, when the information doesn't fit into our current model of the world, we have to accommodate. So we have to build sort of new belief systems, etc. But because the people pushing the propaganda know this, they can create some sentences that stops the person having to accommodate that information. For instance, when all the 5G stuff come up, they just said, oh, that person's a conspiracy theorist. So then the person assimilates the information about what's going on into that box that said, oh, that person's just crazy, rather than change their understanding of the world. Okay. And they do this in such an incredible fashion because they understand people's drives. I want 5G to be safe. I would love 5G to be safe. Okay. I'm motivated it to be safe, but my health is more important than technology to me. Okay. So people are going to resist this because their desires are to basically not have to do anything, path of least resistance. So, but if you can expose them to information that touches on the things that are important to them, then you're going to see different conclusions. And then you've got some important factors to consider, which is in terms of path of least resistance, you want what we call an on-ramp. So what you want is to enable someone to change their behavior slightly, that they can do one thing that will enable them to benefit without too much cost. And then what they will do is they will shift their attitude in response to the behavior that they've changed. This is really key because it was previously thought that you had to change people's attitudes to change their behavior. But in fact, the reverse happens. If you can get them to do one thing, they will in fact change their self-image. For instance, in those studies around, and this is what the pots and pans was about, by the way, in the UK. Once you got people to go out and bang a pan and whatever, they then adopted the attitude that they were supporting the cause, they were behind the workers, and then they would demonize anyone that didn't do it. So it was a very powerful behavior that changed people's attitudes. Now, this has been long known. So in California, I think back in the 70s, they did a study where they went around to people's houses and they said, can we put this sign in your garden? And I've talked about this before. And the sign's a big, ugly sign that says, please drive carefully. Only 17% of people said yes. But when they changed it slightly, they went round to houses in the same neighborhood and they got them to sign a petition. Okay. All they had to do was check, like sign a petition. That was it. They went back to those people 2 weeks later and they said, can we put this sign in your garden? And it went from 17 to 76% change. Now, anyone that does any kind of marketing will know that is a phenomenal shift. Now, the theory is that when the person signs the petition, they change their view on what kind of person they are around that subject. So, what you're really looking for to let people understand what's going on with the RF and the dangers. And my first thing that I was thinking, if you just say to people, turn the Wi-Fi off at night. If you can get people to turn the Wi-Fi off at night and then experience a better sleep, you're going to get a whole series of things happen there. Say they're now on your, and in fact, the other thing I was going to mention is when you're talking to them about this, you find common ground. So what is something you can agree on, literally that you both agree on? So you could say, okay, is it important to have a safe and healthy environment? Okay, so whatever it is, you find a concept where you both agree, and then you effectively become on the same side. And then you can say, okay, you want to sleep better. And then you can explain, and then you can show them why this works. Does that make sense? So effectively, what you've got there is a lot of gain and no downside. Okay. Contrast that with telling people to throw their mobile phone away. Okay. Imagine the resistance to that. Okay. Because if they turn the Wi-Fi off at night, what are they losing? Almost nothing. Yeah, I mean, you might have the odd problem where if they got a teenager that's up to 2 a.m. or whatever, but but other than that, you shouldn't get much resistance. But if you ask someone to throw their phone away, what resistance are you going to get? A huge amount. And that's always the way to think about this. When you suggest something, what is the resistance going to be? Because the resistance is often their lifestyle is molded around whatever the thing is. And of course, what people will do is look for information that supports their current belief. And that's why all the BS that the telecoms pump out is so effective, because it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to give that person a sense of relief that they don't have to think anymore. Does that make sense? Because all of this really comes from the path of least resistance. The brain is always looking for the easiest way out of wherever it is. I mean, water always flows at the path of least resistance. Okay. And what the conditioning has done is it's created via predictive programming the thought pathways that people's minds will go down. And because of that, most people are operating in what's known as a reactive mode. And you can predict when you say something, how they will respond. Okay. So if you say to the average person, a number of statements around the vaccine or 5G, they are probably going to call you a conspiracy theorist, because that has been conditioned through the media to be the average person's response. See, it stops the person from having to think. And as one of the popular quotes in behavioral sciences, thinking to humans is like swimming to cats. They can do it, but they'd rather not. Okay. So I think I'll pause it there to see if the point has been demonstrated well, because it's so key. And it's to notice in ourselves when we're talking to someone, are we showing them or are we telling them? And if you've got an audience that agrees with you and you are an authority in that audience, you generally won't get much objection. But if the person believes something different to you and you tell them, you're going to get a huge amount of objection.
That is so true. Just what you've said. My most successful moments with people is when I get my meter out. It's really hard for people to deny that
Yeah.
what they see. And the other thing which seems to land well with people is demonstrating the TP link boxes to take them off their Wi-Fi. because
Yeah.
it means, just as you said, to turn the Wi-Fi off at night, because it means they don't have to change their lifestyle much. It's kind of easy for them, as long
Yes.
as we can find your video which tells people how to turn off the.
The
I must ask
Wi-Fi.
you
Yeah.
to send me that again, because I need to keep it somewhere safely, because that is so key that they can turn
Yeah.
off the internet service provider thing, because otherwise, if they can't do that, it makes it difficult for them, and then they get resistance and they don't want to do it.
Yes, absolutely right, Catherine. Because the now that brings me on that I'm actually going to show that slide now, because you've given a really good opportunity to go into that. So this is one of the most important slides to understand in all campaigns. And what you've got forces driving change and forces resisting change. And if the resisting forces are stronger than the forces driving change, you're not going to see any change. Now, there's not much force driving change for the average member of the public when it comes to RF, is there? Yeah, you're going to find very few people that are proactive. However, you can actually use some of the existing forces in people's lives to dovetail into RF. For instance, Timothy Ferris, who's a very famous author, he went to I think it was like he was in his 40s or late 30s, and he thought, right, I haven't had any children yet. I'm going to go and freeze my sperm just in case I need it or something happens, etc. And then he had his sperm measured, and he had very low sperm count, and that really shocked him because he was a very healthy person. Then the actual doctor he had was very knowledgeable on EMFs. And he said to him, don't put your phone in your pocket for 3 months and see what happens. So then Timothy literally keeps his phone out of his pocket and turns it on every few hours, checks messages, etc., but doesn't have it on himself. And then in, I think it was 3 months, his sperm count tripled. So he became a very big advocate of, safe tech. So think about this slide on the page. Who would care about that information?
Or young people, or anybody wanting to have a child. If we're talking about the
That's it.
example, yeah.
Anyone that's struggling with a child at the moment,
Mm.
you could present information to them. So you see what you're looking at. You're looking at low-hanging fruit. So any of the particular, you could go to any of the, you could reverse engineer it effectively. Look at what RF does from the various studies, and then go to those people with the solution or the effect. Yeah. So obviously the electrosensitive people, that's a massive low-hanging fruit. Yeah. But they should already be aware anyway. But you see what you're saying? You're looking at, so the force, if someone's wanting a baby, they will literally go, in my opinion, to any lengths to improve the chances of that. So they're going to be very open-minded, aren't they? And then what you can do is you can provide them some solutions like Ethernet, etc., that don't cause too much discomfort to their lifestyle, but potentially gives them a benefit. Now that's really key, because there's one other slide that I'm just going to show you that's really key. So I'm just going to unshare and then find it. So where would I put it?
Hi, Keith.
Hello. Good to see you.
This is great, David. I just wish I could remember it all when it's
Well,
rememberable when we need it, isn't it?
yeah, well, in fact, what I'm just about to do is design a course for this and then put a load of quizzes which will have you incorporating this knowledge into your behavior,
Mm.
because there's ways of doing it that are very simple. Now, there's a slide that I'm trying to find that's very important. And trying to think where I put it.
David, after you've found that,
Yes.
there's a specific situation, if you like, that I'd like to ask your advice on.
I
And I
found the
think if it
slide.
is great, okay.
Okay, so this slide comes from BJ Fogg, who's he's considered the world leader on understanding behavior. Now, what it is he says that no behavior will occur unless these three things occur. So prompt basically is a trigger or a stimulus or anything. It might be you ask someone to do something. It might be that they realize they need to pay their tax, whatever it is. You need some prompt. Then what happens is that if the motivation meets the ability and it literally falls under this line, the behavior will probably happen. If it falls above this line, the behavior is unlikely to happen. So here's an example. Say you've got a friend that's got low motivation to understand about any of the subjects that we've got over the last 4 or 5 years, and you send them a 4-hour documentary, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen because there's no motivation to hit the difficult. But if you send them a 2-minute thing, there's a chance it might happen. So what you've got is that there's got to be sufficient motivation, which can be created, by the way, under certain conditions. And it's actually structural tension is what creates motivation, but that we can go into at another time because it's a little bit complex, but it's probably the most important thing. For instance, you notice, just to give you an example of structural tension, have you noticed clickbaiting on the internet? Okay, that's a form of creating structural tension. So the three things you didn't know about blah, blah, blah. Okay, so structural tension drives motivation. So what it basically says is there's something, that's something you don't know, and you want to know that thing. So that creates the motivation to want to know that thing. So structural tension can be created very powerfully, but when it does, it will create motivation. But the reason for this slide is to understand that if you're trying to get a campaign going, it's to understand the motivation levels of the people you're talking to, knowing whether you need to create those. If you can't, then you need to have the thing that you want people to do to be as easy as possible. Now, as it turns out, when it comes to repeat business and pretty much all behavior, on average, the single most important thing to drive a behavior is how easy that behavior is to do. Okay. I'll give you an example actually of how I created motivation. So I just come back from New Zealand and I was presenting at 2 different conferences, one in Christchurch and one in Auckland. Now, the tickets were quite expensive for the people to attend because, you know, the food's always expensive, etc. So I thought as a token, I offered them my course on behavior free of charge. At the first one, I said to people, you know, this information is useful. If you email me, I'll give you free access. Okay. And there's 500 people in the audience, 25 people email me. At the second conference, I understood a bit more about, you know, ease and motivation, etc. So I said to people, I said, look, this course is going to be very useful for you. You can get free access, but only about 10% of you are going to email me because most of you won't get round to it. Or like 250 people emailed me 10 times. Why did they email me?
Because they wanted to be the tops.
Yes.
They wanted to be like everybody else, the good one.
They wanted to be part of the 10%.
Yeah.
And it didn't, I literally didn't intend to do that. It was just something I said intuitively because I realized that, you know, they would want it, but they would forget to email me. So I just said to them, most of you will forget.
So, David, in a way, what you were doing was kind of creating a situation of supply and demand because people thought, and unless I've misunderstood this, people kind of thought, oh, well, I want to make sure I don't know, maybe
I tell you what I think it was. I think it was this. Yeah, as Catherine pointed out, they wanted to be part of that 10% because, in fact, a lot of people quoted, "I'm one of the 10% in the email." Okay. And it was really an eye-opener to me because I knew all of this, but the difference was I experienced it really firsthand in that instance. But what happened was, and of course I've used it ethically because I'm giving them something, but to 10x the response is quite startling, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what that did, coming back to that other slide, what that did was that increased the motivation. You see, and the request was easy. Yeah, the request was, if you email me, I'll give you access to the course. So all they have to do is send me an email. But when it comes to, and so I think you had a question there, Kate, but I just want to show one more point that's really key. And it's in, I believe it's in this one, this slide. So this is basically a graph around organ donations in Europe for the opt-in and the opt-out countries. Okay, so in these countries, they automatically opt you in. And for these countries, they automatically opt you out. Well, the UK, I think, just changed that. But do you see a pattern? Most people go with the default. Now, because it's easy. Now, this is Zoe Chance, and this TED Talk's brilliant, by the way. And she said, what's easier than ticking a box? Anyone want to guess?
Not ticking the box.
Exactly. So that's what you've got. So effectively, people's motivations are to do the least tough thing. Okay. So people had a choice of emailing me or not emailing me. Okay. They're going to choose to not emailing me because that's the default. But when I created the motivation, that makes sense, that overrode the default was to do, basically the default is to do nothing. How many times you've been at a conference and you have every intention to do 100 things after the conference and you do none of them? I mean, I know that's one of my most common patterns.
I've come back with I go around a mind, body, spirit festival, and I come back with a little carrier bag with all the leaflets of the people that I'm going to connect with, and I've still got a thing here from the thing that we did in Bath, the People's Reset, of all these people I'm supposed to get hold of, and now it's 2 months later. That's great.
Yep. Now, what happens is we often, if we're that person, we often think, oh, they're not interested. They didn't contact me. The truth is they may well be really interested. There's a couple of things to understand here, which is one of them is the law of trivialities, which is people spend most of their time on the least important things. And the reason is because we are always moving towards positive feelings. That's what our brain's doing. So in fact, what they've also noticed is one other key thing around this show don't tell. And Virgin did this. So Virgin Atlantic noticed that nobody's watching their in-flight safety video. They enlisted a couple of behavioral scientists. They completely changed the way they presented it. And not only did people watch it, I think they got something like 6 million views on YouTube in 12 days. So here's the key point. The way you present the information is more important than the information that you present. So the way you say something will have more impact on whether people listen, because the assumption is that if we have something important that somebody needs to know, the assumption is that they want to know. And that's not true. That does not hold up to scientific testing. Okay, and that's from the book, The Inferential Mind. So I guess that concludes the information I wanted to show. I have, as I said, got a couple of articles on why show don't tell is very key. But it's my opinion that when you have, just coming back to just to create the summary of the point, when you create or understand that if you change the inputs to someone's conclusion, the conclusion will change. It can't not. If someone's exposed to an experience that contradicts their world, they have to resolve that. And one of the biggest mistakes that anyone makes in this, and myself included, is that if you present information to someone that contradicts their current belief, they will nearly always reject it. But when you elicit two bits of information that are in someone's mind that contradict each other, they don't get a choice. So if someone believes RF are safe, but you're able to show them information that it's not safe, they then have structural tension they have to resolve. Now, it will depend on many factors, which when you go into this in a more technical nature, you can then understand how to present that information to improve the chances of success that the person will reassess their belief, and it will depend on those forces at play. So who has more reason to believe that RF is safe? Would it be a telecoms engineer or would it be an average member of the public?
Telecom engineer.
Telecoms
Exactly, 'cause-
engineer, they're installing it, aren't they?
Yeah, they've got more skin in the game. So when it
Mm.
comes to the COVID narrative, it's always more difficult to get through the doctors and the nurses because they have more forces at play to believe their current belief system. So, you know, one recommendation is start with the low-hanging fruit in order to get momentum, because momentum is very key. Yeah. So when you get them to turn the Wi-Fi off at night, you've got some momentum, which they will probably start looking at other ways to reduce their exposure.
David, I was just thinking when you said that. Oh, sorry, was that Kate? Did you want to say something?
Yes, go ahead, Amanda. I can wait.
Okay,
Please
thank you.
go.
Funnily enough, there was a brilliant guy in the UK. Sadly, he passed away recently under what might be perceived as mysterious circumstances. But he had this this radio show. I think he was on TV as well, called Just One Thing. And he used to get people to change just one thing, like giving up coffee or whatever. And then he'd interview them a week later and see how they felt. And with hindsight, I wish I had suggested that he asked somebody, you know, to turn off their Wi-Fi at night or whatever. However, we are where we are. But in terms of low-hanging fruit, as I don't know if you remember, but some other people on the call might, I was somewhat amazed to see. Well, it's been amazing that a lot of people in this country, parents and teachers, have started to be concerned about the kids being on smartphones so much.
Yeah.
Now, obviously not for the reasons that we are concerned. But I thought, well, it's a chink in the armor. And then,
yes,
incredibly, there was an open letter written by a guy who's actually a film director. I didn't realize he's made a film about a young woman who was addicted, had screen addiction or whatever. And he and a couple of other celebrities wrote a letter to Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, because there've been these posters on the underground advertising 5G's coming to the underground. And he does hint at the fact that there are a lot of people with very limited resources trying to, you know, who are concerned about the effects on children. So I thought, right, this is the low-hanging fruit. These people, he's got this open letter has been signed by the most extraordinarily long list of people, some of whom are also celebrities, some not. And I thought, right, I'm going to write to all the ones whose details I can find, but particularly the guy that wrote it, and ask them, or gently put it to them, that there is an aspect of this situation that they might not be aware of, basing it on a letter that we've already sent to 40,000 schools, head teachers. Interestingly, I was persuaded to send a kind of more hard-hitting, science-based letter, and I don't think we had any replies. We may have sown some seeds nevertheless, but I think our original letter that Catherine helped me write would have been better. But anyway, going back to the original letter, I've been working on adapting. So what I'm trying to get to is, I think what you've suggested is brilliant, and certainly as a feng shui consultant, I've always found that when I can demonstrate something, you know, that people are definitely more convinced. But it takes a long time to reach, you know, for us to all reach every person in every country we each live in, it would take forever. So
yeah, but you don't need to. That's the key. You see
Right.
I mean, the key is to understand the forces at play. Okay, that's at the strategic level. So if we look at this, let me share my screen. Oh, so it's really to think about the forces at play, and when you have that, then you start to think about the solutions that you want to design. So what are the forces driving change, and what are the restraining forces? So combine that with knowledge that any habit to form needs a positive experience. That's the reinforcement. So in BJ Fogg's book on tiny habits, which is quite profound, certainly for me to understand why certain things would work and other things wouldn't. If a person turns around and says, right, I'm going to floss every tooth for the next 30 days, that's going to be quite a lot of effort because it's going to have to be done unconsciously, because until the habit forms, you've got to consciously do it. So what he did was he designed a program where you floss one tooth, okay? You floss one tooth and then you celebrate. Because what happens is that the key to repeat business is the experience that the person had. For instance, with a personal trainer, I think the single biggest mistake they make, and when I was a personal trainer, I made this a number of times, is that they assume that their client wants a big workout, and their client will tell them they want a big workout. But what they really want is to feel good. So if the personal trainer works the client out and the client can't walk for a week, do you think that client is motivated to come back next week? No, because it doesn't feel good. It's like there's this net effect. Okay. Now, what happens is if you work that client out and you gradually increase the workout, but it's always within that it feels good, you see what happens over time. The client is developing a positive experience of the exercise, and then what happens is they can even get addicted to they run 10K, not enough run, because it's always a positive experience, and that's the key. So the mistake that I've made with this information over the last 4 years is I've presented too much in a short space of time, which overwhelms people, and that's not a positive experience. But if you look at the information, and I'm probably even doing it now, but if I only show you 1 or 2 bits and you get it, and then it's a positive experience, then you want to go to the next level. And that's how I'm going to start designing the courses. And we've got the content ready now. But you see what happens when you have that positive experience. So here's the key. You can deliver bad information in a positive frame, or you can deliver positive information in a negative frame. So if someone reads something that's not particularly nice, but they feel empowered, that's a positive experience. You see the difference? So the people that are consuming all the information are the ones that are having a positive experience because they are framing it as being empowering. The ones that are ignoring it are the ones that are framing it as, oh, it's doomsday or whatever it is. So it's always about the experience the person has on consuming the information, which is why the Virgin Atlantic video became so powerful, because it was entertaining. So that's, in my opinion, why you've got all these TikTok dances and everything else, because it's all about entertainment. And that's why bread and circus is such a powerful quote. That makes sense? Because the unconscious mind. Sorry, go on, Kate.
No, I did. I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I'd kind of finished. So basically, I was saying that's why the bread and circus and the games and everything else are so powerful, because what they're doing is they are entertaining the unconscious mind.
So I have about 5 different questions, but I'll start with
Go
the
for it.
first.
But at some point, either Kate, sorry, but either before or after, is there any way in which, because I still feel I need to know how to do that in the written word. And it may be, I mean, David, because obviously you've got limited amount of time on this call and Kate's got loads of questions, which is fair enough, and everybody's probably got questions. Would you, excuse me, Sorry. I just wondered if, oh, sorry, if I could send you what I've written and the letter that I'm responding to. And oh dear, sorry, I breathed in some saliva, which is a bit.
Oh, dear.
And just for you, because I've tried to put that into practice, but just to get I'd love your feedback, and there probably isn't time to do it now.
Yeah, what I do, I'll answer Kate's questions first, and then I'll show you a tool that I'm using that enables you to answer a lot of those questions.
Okay, all right. So go ahead, Kate. Thank you.
Okay, so one question is, what from what you just said, it occurs to me that what makes one person more inclined to absorb information, new information that may be slightly uncomfortable, and make changes in their life, besides their past experience and besides how it's being presented, one ingredient might be the person's innate relationship to discomfort. I know myself, I don't I don't have a great need to feel connected. I don't have a great tribal sense, and I don't have a great physical discomfort level. Like, I don't notice if it's cold or something. I'll just put a sweater on. I won't think about it. But some people are very attached to their physical pleasures and comfort. Would that make them less inclined to take new thoughts? That's my first thing.
Right. So what you've got is it's effectively, yeah, it's all to do with conditioning. So we're all wired individually, but there's a lot of commonalities between the way that people are wired. So basically there's a fundamental commonality between all humans. And then what you'll see is the majority of humans would develop one pattern, and a small minority would develop the opposite or a different pattern. So I wouldn't think about that one too deeply, but the thing to think about is that you're going to hit much greater amount of people by giving them a positive experience of the information that they're consuming. So what you've got in the behavioral science thing is you've got general principles. You've got these, what's it called? There's a term for it, isn't there? Heuristics. So you've got heuristics, which is, well, for instance, I think it's something like 75% of people, when given a choice of 3 sizes, will always choose the medium.
Oh yeah, that's the Starbucks coffee thing or something, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got that heuristic, okay, but you've got 25% of people that won't. So the way to look at this, Kate, is, and it's really important that those on the call today do not use themselves as examples. Because this is one of the biggest mistakes that the truth movement makes, is it projects their own belief system onto other people's behaviors. And in fact, we need to orientate ourselves to reality, not what our belief system thinks reality is. And the way to do that is to use objective feedback. So if I think that 10 people should be interested in the dangers of RF, but when I talk to 10 people, they're not, I have to orientate myself to, they're not caring about the way that I'm presenting it. So it might be the way that I'm presenting it isn't good, or it might be that they just don't care, or I haven't shown them how important to them it is. So it's about connecting to their value system, what it is that you're presenting, and finding the motivations that it becomes important to them.
This is Sarah. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to jump in. Again, I'm not going to be on the call for too long, but I have a very quick question.
Yes.
The school, one of the high schools, they do not have an off and away policy, a strict one. And I asked the department chair, and she said that's because the parents are up in arms. They need to be connected to the students every second and are giving a lot of pushback regarding a cell phone off and away policy. And I'm curious how, after you answer Kate and Amanda's question, if you could apply what I'm saying, how could you reach, how could how could the school or the department chair say to the parents, something that would change their mind?
Yeah, well, that's when you want to understand. Right, so come back to this slide, Sarah, and you want to map out this. So what are the driving forces and what are the restraining forces? And what you do is you find a way to have the state moved, because you want to align. So the driving forces are going to be, they want their kids to be healthy. So you've eventually got to make a convincing argument to align with the driving forces. The restraining force, because you'll see people want to justify their current behavior as one thing. So if ever I'm going to lunch with someone and they have children, and I say to them, turn your phone off or whatever, they will always say, oh no, just in case there's an emergency, I need people to be able to get hold of me. Now that becomes a very good excuse to justify their behavior. And the truth is, if they were truly honest with themselves, what could they do in that moment? If there was an emergency, literally the kid would be taken by the teachers to a hospital or whatever it was. But it's such a powerful thought pattern. That makes sense. So you're always going to be coming up against those. And then the question is it a good reason or the real reason? Because I think it was JP Morgan that said there's two reasons for everything, a good reason and a real reason. And what the governments and the institutions always do is they will sell you the good reason to cover up the real reason. It makes sense, Sarah, but I would definitely look at that slide and work it out and work out the forces at play. And once you work out the forces at play, then you've got how you're going to present your argument.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I'm like, we always turn our phone off at night and all that kind of stuff. And my thing was, if there is an emergency in the night, I'd rather handle it in the morning once I've had a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, because sorry, Kate, go on.
David, please go ahead.
Oh no, I'd finished. I was just basically saying, when we think about, it's really to test the thoughts that we come up with. Yeah, because a lot of the time the thoughts that we've come up with are automatically produced from our conditioning. And it's very wise to say, is that true? And that, for instance, we were somewhere with my girlfriend and she said, oh, that's right. They almost had got her the wrong dish. And I said, it's all right, we just order another one. Like it's no big thing. When you really think about it, there's a lot of the time the thing we're worrying about doesn't really have much merit to it. Yeah, it's about challenging the automatic. So the key is that when you're talking to most people around, say, EMFs, they are all going to be subjected to almost the same propaganda. So you can almost predict, because in fact, there's a really powerful book, and I only come across it a few weeks ago, but it is one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and it's called The Path of Least Resistance by Robert Fritz.
Yeah, really.
Such a cool book. Do you know what I thought about? Because feng shui is really key in that as well, isn't it? Because feng shui is all about the path of least resistance a lot of the time with, things in the way. Because so one of the really good conclusions from the book is that most people are just in reactive mode. So if someone's been conditioned with propaganda, if you start with a certain amount of points, they are just going to react in a very standard way. And you see it all the time, don't you? It's almost like you're talking to robots a lot of the time with this, because they've been conditioned to react a certain way. That makes sense? So what you want to understand is not to fall into the pitfall of the common things that a standard activist will do. So one is not to tell anyone anything. It's to show them. And that's such a subtle change. Okay. But when you start,
this is Sarah again. I'm just thinking on the situation, because obviously the workaround is to have the parents either call the main office, which will directly funnel to the classroom, or call the teacher's cell phone or text the teacher's cell phone. But for whatever reason, that is too inconvenient or is not. I don't know. I'm there. For some reason, those parents convinced the school administration, but the problem is the kids are streaming videos, and they're really not on task for their work. So I'm just wondering how to phrase this, to parents, saying, well, these are the workarounds. This is your trade-off, is that your kid might not because their grades won't be up to par, and then you'll have to pay out more money for college.
Yeah, that's a very powerful one. Yeah, but that's a very powerful one, because that's one of the arguments we use with the fluoride. So I've been working with the guys in New Zealand for their flyers on the fluoride. So what you're looking for is think about what's important to the parents and how do you phrase your argument that it touches on those things. So I would sit down with that slide, the one I'm just going to share it again. But it's only when you start to think about this, right? So incentives is a driving force, okay? And incentives are very powerful. To give you an example of how powerful incentives are, and you all know in the US, I think it was 30,000 to put COVID on the death cert, yeah? I think that was common knowledge, right? If a hospital gets a 30,000 bonus for in COVID on the death cert, do you think there's going to be a lot of COVID on the death cert?
Yeah.
Yeah. People will find a way to justify it, manipulate reality, whatever it is. Wells Fargo created a incentive scheme, and Wells Fargo is a big US bank. They created an incentive scheme that for staff to pretty much keep their salary and get some bonuses, they had to open new accounts with existing customers. Do you know what happened? Over 5,000 employees committed fraud. Okay. Incentives are very, very powerful. So when they pay schools to put up 5G towers, those schools are going to then support that, and then they're going to find reasons to support it. Makes sense. Incentives. In fact, I'm just going to show you one more slide, and I try and promise myself not to show too many slides because that's my habit. But basically, what they do is, and this is what you want to think about doing ethically, is think about the outcome that you want. So when it came to the supermarkets and the self-checkout, and I talk about policy lies because they're going to tell you it's for your benefit. Okay, that's always the way, but it's basically you end up working for the supermarket. So what they do is, and that's actually just a WMD because the slide was previously about the WMDs in Iraq. But basically, you're going to get a good reason and you're going to get a real reason. Okay, so the real reason that supermarkets want you to shop at the self-checkout is because they can film you, they can do everything automated, they save money. There's so many reasons for them. Okay, now what they do is that they do step by step. So basically, the first step, okay. Now those I've just copied those, but I'll explain that through my language. So the first step was they put checkouts, okay, self-checkouts, and then they reduce the amount of people staffing the manual checkouts. So then what happens? It creates a structural tension for people to want to use the self-checkout. To make sense? And then they take away all the barriers. So they basically, there's no cameras, they take cash, they make it as easy as possible to take that first step. Then they remove it taking cash. Then they put a camera on there. Do you see what they do? They basically get you to take that first step. They make it as easy as possible. And it's only then that they start removing all of the things once you've built the habit. And they created the structural tension by removing the employee at checkouts. So then you've got a choice. I either wait a long while or I just go and use the self-checkout. So that's about understanding the forces at play. So what you want to do is getting someone on side is making that first step as easy as possible. Okay, you want the person to start caring, right? So then what you're looking at, what's the forces at play with the school? The kids' attention, their grades, all of these things, their health, but you're going to struggle with the health one initially because there's so much propaganda saying it's not unhealthy. Yeah. So you can't tell them that, but you want to show them. Like I would choose one thing like the fertility studies or something like that. And then what I would do is I would do an order in which I presented it. First, I would create something like I say, right, there's been a history of things that we thought were safe that weren't safe. I would actually probably proceed that by, we all care about our children's health, don't we? And we would do a lot of things to protect that. Okay, once they say yes, that part of their mind is elicited. Okay, that's really important. Then the second thing I'd say, well, there's been loads of instances where we thought something was safe, but it wasn't, asbestos, etc., etc. So as a caring parent, it's important to do our due diligence, isn't it? See what I'm doing? I'm slowly walking them down the path of caring. And then I'd say, well, look at this. And I might show them that Deborah Davis slide around the sperm count is pretty powerful. You guys seen that one? It's a really, but she shows a couple of slides of sperm count, one person. That you're showing them that they're going to absorb that, and that's going to then start making. And then what it is, their information is going to, their mind is going to do the rest, and they're going to start
Dave,
that.
okay, again, I interrupted you. I didn't mean.
No, go for it, Kate. I'd finished.
Okay, so given the I want to share one little anecdote and then ask a question. The little anecdote is this. My son said, is this being recorded, by the way?
Yes, it is, Kate.
Whatever.
We can stop recording for a moment if you want.
Yeah, we could. We could stop and then resume.
Yes.
Hang on, let me just do that.
Yes, please. What can we do to counter this, the pathogens of all the confluence of information out there, coming from, the industry and government and all sorts of things that give that even if you present them with the correct information in the correct place, there is going to be that interference of this vast
Propaganda.
viral overload. Vast
exactly.
viral overload. How can we strengthen the immune system? What strengthens the immune system to counter it?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. You again, you've got to understand the forces at play. Okay, now what the propaganda is, it's about shaping a person's opinions. And what about your information is about exposing them to information that gives them the truth. Now, you can ask anyone on this call now, would you trust your state media? Okay. Would anyone here trust? Obviously not, because you inoculated against it because you've seen the lies and everything else. So when you show someone something, generally the thing you're showing will change. So come back to that slide again. What you have is this is the key slide to think about, Kate. And I think about it from a mechanics perspective rather than what I see in the world, in that everyone will have their experiences in here. Okay. Now that's what governs their conclusions. Now it's about, so basically some of the key things is that people still believe the media presents the truth. And once they realize the media is just a corporate mouthpiece, they no longer will get that programming. That makes sense? They're literally, you've inoculated them against that. Once you can, because it's all about showing them. It's not about, there's an order really. The first thing you have to do with someone is show them that you're on their side. Okay? Because if they consider you to be the opposing group, they're going to dismiss everything that you say. So there's a document on the website. I'll just quickly show it. Which is called the do's and don'ts in conversation. And what you want to do is you want to understand each of the concepts here. Okay. And that will give you a much better chance of presenting the information. Okay. It's actually, it's called, well, they just changed the link. So it's reaching people don't like conversations. So what you're looking at doing is opening up a communication channel to someone. And what you're looking to do is show them information that's going to change their unconscious mind. So anything you tell them is unlikely to change their mind because it's not going to make it into the engine room. And that's why show don't tell is so powerful, because you can't unsee something. Yeah. If you talk to, like, there's a lawyer, one of the lawyers from the US that's in all those court cases. I had a few meetings with him, and he said to me that he came across a top secret document, and when he read it, it literally just shattered his whole world to see what his government was doing. Okay. That's it. You literally, it's an experience that will change this. And that's why, Catherine, you will have so much success with showing someone the meter. Okay, because it's an experience.
Dave, I want to ask a question.
Yes.
If people get an experience that, mainstream media is, not to be trusted.
Yeah.
Which many people are getting right now, that's fine. Then they're going to glitch and 100% mistrust mainstream media, and they're going to have that same lack of critical thinking and lack of processing and flexibility of the mind and ability to intuit and perceive, as if they believe the media was totally right. How can we help
Well, you don't get to choose.
one another
Well, that's
to become more flexible people that are not such black-white thinkers, because we don't want to just flip to a different black and white. We want to get them.
But it is mostly gray. See, the thing is, you can't decide how you feel about what you watch. That's an illusion. Does anyone here decide to get angry? Okay, and you laugh because we think we do, but we don't. We don't decide how we respond. Okay, so the only way, in my opinion, to protect yourself from the media is not to watch it. If you watch it, it's going to be doing things to you. So the key, the summary that I have is present information in a very engaging, truthful, ethical, powerful way, and then the dice fall where they may, and the people will absorb and basically find their way to what's correct. The challenge is that I think that very few people in the activist world know how to present information in the way that it's best absorbed. And it's not a criticism, because we have been conditioned to think that we learn explicitly. And the truth is that's the slowest way we learn. implicitly observational is how we learn very powerfully. And that's why Netflix and Amazon Prime, all these things are so powerful, because they're very addictive, because they give people a positive experience. And then the person literally is like a dustbin of absorbing the information they watch.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
that. It's very interesting. When we were doing Brighter Times magazine, our remit was that we had to produce information that was short articles, 400 words, with pictures, that was going to get information across in a very simple, like 101 version way. And it was so difficult that most of the writers could not do it. And it is the reason, it's the number one reason why we have not produced any more issues of Brighter Times, because it's too challenging at the moment to be able to do that, for people to spend the time to write the kind of articles that David is describing, that would really help to people, to show them things rather than telling them things. And
Yeah.
I just think it's such an interesting challenge. If I had 24 more hours a day, I feel I would have done it. And it's the difference with, let's say, something like The Light, is that it's a brilliant paper, but it's a brilliant paper for people who know already what's going on. It's not doing what you're describing, David.
Yeah, getting
And
out
with,
the echo chamber.
yes, and with regards to what Kate said, it seems that we've just got to go back, when the story that you told of the person that somebody that you know, it's like showing them around the subject, maybe, so that you take it back a stage, so that they're in a different context, perhaps, and then that might open them up to being more receptive to the information that
Yeah,
you're
it's all about.
Bye, guys. Bye. Gotta go. Okay, bye.
Oh, bye.
Okay,
Thanks so
cheers,
much for
Sarah.
setting the Zoom up, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'll watch the
Yes,
video
thank
recording.
So what I would say is that I think we've spoke about a lot of things today. And you see, what happens is that when you first get exposed to something, it's all a bit confusing. Okay. And then it's how you use it. Okay. So has anyone else come across Perplexity?
You just showed it that on the website, didn't you? Is that where your articles are?
Yeah, well, Perplexity is literally it's an AI research tool. And yes, we need to be careful with AI. But this particular tool has enabled me to do things 100 times faster than I could before. It's truly astonishing. So
I remember you showed it to us last time.
Yeah, so I'll quickly show you what I did. Right, so let me share. All right, so and the reason it's really powerful if you know your subject really well. Okay, so I'd read all these books and I know about show, don't tell. So look at the question I'm asking. Is that big enough, by the way?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, me.
Right, so I've asked the question. In sharing important information with people, the concept of show, do not tell is important for so many reasons. If you tell people information that contradicts their current reality, they tend to reject it. So I'm basically training it in the concept I want to talk to. If you show them, they can often change their mind. If you show them, they can often change their minds. Leverage the books, How to Change the Minds by David McGrady. So I've given it a few books that I know are very key on this subject. And then I said, provide a few examples. Yeah, I've said, do not use climate change because it pretty much always goes to that. Use pharmaceutical and misleading through advertising. So basically, because I know this subject inside out, it's then produced a very key article for me, okay, to explain that concept. So it's written the article for me. Now and then I could literally say, rewrite it in a very entertaining, engaging way. I could say, rewrite it in a comedy way. So what you find is that you become the editor. That's the key thing. So as long as you know the subject deeply, you can get this to do all the legwork. So what I could say is, right, I'm going to just off the top of my head say, provide me an example of how someone would tell someone something and it not work versus showing them which would work. Now, I don't know what that's going to do as an answer, but basically, it so far has come back with very powerful right. So there's a classic. Yeah. Do you think you need to tell anyone that junk food is unhealthy? You shouldn't, okay?
Not
But the showing, I did this actually. I'll give you an example. When I was in Australia, I said to one of my clients about organic food, and they were like, oh, whatever. Okay, had no effect. I said, let me cook you a meal. I went and got loads of organic ingredients. I cooked them a meal, and they said, how much brown sugar did you put in these carrots? I said, I didn't put any brown sugar. There's no sugar in it. It's just the carrots. Their experience, and 10 years later, they were still buying organic food. Okay. There's no substitute for an experience. So what I would do, the way I use perplexity now is that, for instance, I've just read that book, right? The Path of Least Resistance. So I actually just going to find it because I uploaded the book.
I'll tell you what, David, I'm really glad you're on our side.
Yeah, we need you. Definitely. I mean,
And
while you look for it, I was just going to say that as Catherine kind of pointed out, it's what was I going to say? It's gone out of my head now. It's I can't remember now. Damn.
Okay, here's the key thing, right? So from this book, yeah, people, like all of nature, follow the path of least resistance. Okay. The underlying structure of one's life determines this path. Okay. It is possible to change this fundamental structure. So basically, the roads in Boston are they're very apparently haphazard and all over the place. And the reason for that apparently is because it was originally cow paths. And the cow would basically walk the path of least resistance. It would avoid the hills. It would go, if it was a rock or whatever. And what happens is that when a thought pattern is developed, it becomes habitual, and then the person habitually thinks that way. And that's why conditioning is so powerful. So here I could say, literally with perplexity, I can interact with the book. Give me an example of how companies use the path of least resistance to sell their products. So you see what I'm able to, so any of the concepts we've spoken about today, you can literally just keep asking it. Yeah. So basically, Amazon, you know why Amazon's one of the most powerful companies? Has anyone ever bought from Amazon? It is the easiest thing possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
They remove all the obstacles. So subscription models. So basically, you notice that. So all of these things. But let's come back to that show, don't tell. Right. So if I have all right. Right. So let's think of if I have concerns about a technology that I think negative, and it will correct all the typos, by the way, and I think negatively affects someone's health. If I tell them, they will probably reject it. How could I show them?
Wow, it's
You
incredible.
know what I
that-
mean?
Yeah.
So it's really with something like, so the way I look at perplexity is I've got 100 experts at my fingertips at any one moment. The big be careful is know your subject and know the sources that it's using. So if I just asked it, are EMFs safe? What do you think it's going to say? It's going to say yes. But if I go,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm kind of thinking. Because
but let me see what you do. According to whatever Davis's place, what's it called? Environmental.
Environmental Health Trust.
Mm.
EH training.
Environmental Health Trust, but whatever.
Yeah. What are the concerns about EMF? See, the other thing this does in terms of producing all your data, because with what I did with the fluoride flyer is I said, I chose the couple of places that had all the data. What I got it to do is I got it to produce all the science. Then I trained it up in behavioral science. I got it to produce me a flyer and a few articles. I mean, I think we really want to understand this bit of software because it can basically increase.
David, it did not it did correct it. It did correct it.
Look at that. So basically now, because I've given it that prompt, right? What?
Virility.
You know what I mean? So you've literally got, you can empower any activist with this software. And again, as long as because I did a course in this a few weeks ago, which I paid £15 for.
Mm.
And it's made me so much more productive.
Super impressive. I mean, what I was going to say is that I think that there is a huge difference between when you're able to interact with someone on a one-to-one, or if you're giving a talk to a group of people, and when you're producing a written document, which obviously you've done with the flyer you were talking about, that you don't know the individual's response, so you can't tailor it. And I think, as Catherine pointed out, it's the trouble is that the things we want to tell people are not palatable. And so it's very hard to find a way of putting across that information. What I noticed in the open letter that I referred to earlier is that they had actually come up with some really clever ideas. I thought, golly, how did we not? Things like 5 tips, which when I discussed it with a colleague who's helping me with the letter, she said, oh, we could have 5 tips for protection against EMFs or whatever.
Mm.
And they also came up with this flyer, as I told other people last time or before. They came up with this slogan: "It's okay to be off grid if you're a kid." Or actually, of course, as we know, for all of us. But anyway, and so they've come up with some fun and creative things. But I kind of need to get my head around what is it I'm actually asking them to do in the light of the fact that they've come up with, you know, that they're sort of potentially on side, but they don't know about the really nasty aspects of it, or they know about some of the nasty aspects, but not the stuff that we know. That is the thing.
You're looking for an on-ramp.
Is it
That's
on ramp that you're saying,
Yeah.
as in
Yeah.
going up a ramp? Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
I
you're
see.
looking, well, in the UK, you're looking for a slip road.
Right,
Ah,
slip
right.
road. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get them on? So basically, look at this, right? 5 ways to protect yourself from EM exposure.
Mm.
Carries several underlying assumptions. Yeah.
Mm. Right.
See, that's what it's communicating unconsciously.
Mm.
It's all about the assumptions.
Mm.
Okay. So when you say 5 ways to protect yourself, you're not saying EMFs are bad directly. You see what it does?
Mm.
It's the unconscious communication is so powerful. So basically, you could say 3 simple ways to protect your fertility rate.
Mm.
Okay. Now, anyone that cares about that is suddenly engaged and then you're an on-ramp. And what you do is you pace them. So you say, we all love technology. It's an important part of our lives. Yes, we could probably use more of it and have more freedom. But is it important to think about its effects on our health? You see, right, I'm going to talk for a few minutes, right, and see the way I'm talking. Okay, so we all love technology. It's very useful, and the sat navs are so wonderful. You can, it's very hard to be lost nowadays. But obviously, we all care about our health. So if there was 3 simple ways to protect yourself from the potentially negative effects of some of the technology, it would be wise to do so. So 1, switching off the Wi-Fi at night would protect us from any potential negative. Right, you notice what I'm doing? It's hard to object to what I'm saying, isn't it?
It is.
Because I'm not telling you anything. I'm guiding you through a story, and I'm basically what's known as hedging, potentially harmful, etc. It really softens the blow. And you're not losing anything, but you're gaining some. You see, because I've practiced so much, that's why I will end up speaking like that to someone. And if you produce your flyers that way, because a lot of the problem is that we force people to take a side. We don't let them have the on-ramp to the information.
David, what if there's no action that you specifically want? No specific action, but you're just trying to raise awareness. We're starting.
Well, that is an action.
Let me finish. We're starting a satellite awareness raising campaign.
Yeah.
There's almost nothing anyone can do. I mean, we're going to hopefully have a declaration and a few other things that they can sign, but there's virtually no specific action they can take. But we want them to be aware, the world to be aware of this. So ultimately, there's some pushback for environmental regulation and some pushback to crapping out the entire heavens.
Yep.
But
So
there's no
who's
specific action.
Yeah. Well, who's the right? So then design the lowest. Who's the lowest hanging fruit?
The general public,
don't-
I would have thought in that this case.
I'd say there's one more important, more easier than that. What about the
Elon
stargazers?
Musk?
The stargazers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
right.
Right, so
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically,
We're organizing a committee with bunches of people, the astronomers, the military people, who organize this. But what we ask the public to do?
Yeah, but you've got to understand the forces at play. So if there's no motivation, you've got to find a way to create it.
I'm thinking of a way. Sorry.
What? Motivation to do what, David? We're not.
Well, that's the whole. No,
I've
but
got an
that's the
idea.
point.
Yeah. So, for example, everybody or that most people I talk to, they don't like the idea of space debris. That it seems to be, the thing that things collide in space, and you can make the analogy with rubbish on the ground, and then it creates this, I can't think what it's called, but when you have more and more debris, and then it creates a cascade sort of effect. And that I can see that people could get on board with. Now, it's not really the aspect, something like that.
Again, there's no action that they can take to stop space debris.
But Kate, take it a step back. What you is that you want to make someone aware of something. Okay.
Correct.
So that's your goal. Okay. So that's your action. Your action is to make them aware. So then you got to think about what is the things that will bring it into their awareness. Okay. And that's where you start. So you start with a fundamental question. So basically, so let's look at Catherine's example, which is pretty good. Okay.
Wait, just a moment. David, before we do this, let me go back. I'm fine how to bring it to awareness. I know all the issues, and I know, and all the things you're saying are very good for bringing in awareness. But when somebody cannot do something and you show them they're stuck, that's even more of a trap, and they feel powerless to do anything, and it
Well, yeah,
doesn't help.
that's the key point, because what you're effectively doing is you're eliciting a state. So then you've got to ask yourself, see, because that's one of the biggest things, is that if you can show them some kind of way of feeling empowered about this, yeah, you really want to think about
Yeah.
that. So a lot of the time when I'm talking to people now, whatever, I've kind of got one part of my consciousness on, is there any point in this person knowing this? You know what I mean? Is it got a net positive effect? Am I better off showing them something that they can do something that will have a positive effect? I've actually got to run to another meeting now, but I think with what we've just gone through is to understand that I think you need to go through these concepts a few times. And in fact, what would be really useful, and I'm happy to do, is that we brainstorm some ways to use it. Because that's the only way that you really get to build those habits in your mind, is and that's why when I looked at when I typed in that example, give me an example of show, don't tell, you start to see the differences of them. Yeah. And then you start to notice your habits. And then what actually happens is when you start practicing showing and not telling, it then becomes a habit. Okay. So even on Saturday, I was actually in Southend. Catherine Nicholas was down there for the 5G thing. And, they asked me to speak. So I did nothing prepared. I just grabbed the microphone. And then all I did was start talking, showing what 15-minute cities are sold to us. I said, well, if that was true, why is all the effort putting up the cameras and the barriers? If it was really for our benefit, then they wouldn't need to put us in this sort of barrier, would they? They would just build everything in 15 minutes and we would use it. I said, so it's about practicing, and then you just start to do that. I have to run now, but yeah, I was happy to come on again in 2 weeks. But I will send these couple of documents on show, don't tell, and and practice it, and think about, if you've got the public conditioned to believe that EMF is safe, you don't want to tell them it's not. You need to show them. So basically the way I would say it, so yeah, well, I love technology. I wish it was safe. And I can understand why we think it's safe, because we've got institutions, etc. But what if there was more information we needed to know? Yeah. And if it did affect our health, would you want to know? Okay. So if we look at the information, we look at sperm count, you see what I'm doing? I'm just, again, talking through that and nothing. See what it is. You want to design something like the fly or whatever it is. And you literally want to put yourself in that person's shoes and see if they object. That makes sense? Right. Okay. Lovely to see you all.
Much.
I'm going to have to run, but yeah, you got this recorded.
Brilliant.
Right.
Thank you so
good.
much.
See you in 2
Really
weeks' time.
helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're just literally practice this stuff. And if you go through it, it's almost like, maybe make some notes on the key points and then, yeah, just practice them.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So much.
Take care. Have a
Cheers,
good
guys.
week.
Bye-bye.